Today I'm rambling on around Wolverton. Not really explored here before, so there'll be a lot that I don't talk about, but some things that have taken my interest. And this secret garden, which is just opposite the railway station, you can hear the train now, was built, well, if built's the right word, was evolved in 1999. The locals got together, and this was a scrap of railway land, and they put it all together and made it into this beautiful little garden. It was some derelict land and formerly the site of Victorian townhouses. So we'll go and have a look. Within the gardens we can still see the remains of two of the railway villas that were built for the top brass. Looks a bit like Pompeii down there, doesn't it? And one was the station master, who was called Mr. Blott. Another house was the railway accountant, and farther up there was two more villas that were one was for the doctor, and another one, when a fire broke out, the monkey had to be rescued. So that sounds a bit exotic, doesn't it? Wolverton was the first railway town. It was founded in the early 19th century, so the Victorian days really made a profound effect on this town, which was just sort of a little village before then. Later on we'll go and look at some of the medieval remains of the old village. The Grand Union Canal passes through it on the northern side. We'll just go and have a look at that now. And then going north we come up to Cosgrove and the Iron Trunk Aqueduct. This really is a lovely little spot. So in 1838 Wolverton became the site of a locomotive repair shop. It was midway between London and Birmingham. It's the home of the Royal Train. In the wartime they used to build parts for bomber planes and rifles. In 1844 over 200 houses were built for the workers, with schools and a church and a market. So here's the canal now, and there's the railway bridge. What an interesting place. In 1967 Wolverton became part of Milton Keynes, which was newly developed then. There's lots of railway heritage left here. The sheds went on for miles and miles, and some of them now have been made into shops, Tesco and Lidl, but there's plenty still left. Some of them are quite derelict, others have been made into apartments, and others still functioning. Look at these two chaps sitting here. Not really sure who they are. I'll have a look and see if I can find out. We're in the churchyard of St George, the parish church of Wolverton. Very nice, very peaceful. And this road sort of runs parallel to the main street. We're going down there afterwards, and there's a big building called the Agora, which I think is a Greek name meaning marketplace. And there was a lot of controversy when it was built in 1971 because they had to demolish quite a few houses and it was built to be a sort of community space that had concerts on, that had shops in, a market hall, and it's never really been a success, and there's talk now of demolishing it and building houses. Full circle. A couple of interesting buildings on Church Street. That used to be the old post office sorting office, and then we've got an old Methodist chapel there, and this is where all the buses stop. That's not particularly interesting, but just a fact. I love to spot old signs on buildings, and there we have one. Hovis. So maybe that was a bakery. It's a fine house anyway. Looks a bit Georgian, doesn't it? Don't know anything about it, but possibly the old bakery. And this is the Agora that I was just talking about. It does look a bit typical of 1971, doesn't it? So I don't know if it's closed now, or to all accounts it's not very well used, and possibly set for demolition. As you might expect, there was lots of pubs in Wolverton to service the thirsty railway workers. This was one of them. It seems to be still functioning. The Queen Victoria. There was 1861 this was built, and we'll have a look at some of the others as we go along. This was formerly the Empire Cinema. There was another cinema in Wolverton, which we'll have a look at. This Empire Cinema was converted from a toy factory. It opened in 1919 and closed in 1969. The capacity was 800. Only had quite a short life, didn't it? 50 years. But then I suppose it was the advent of television. With the railway coming to Wolverton, creating hundreds of jobs. As we said before, hundreds of terraced houses were built. And there's street upon street of them. Part of the railway heritage here, still left, these engine sheds. Corner we have one of the great railway clubs, the Crawford Arms. Spelt a bit unusual, isn't it? And next to it here we have the Palace Cinema that was. Doesn't really do it any favours because it's painting it black. Anyway, at least it's still standing. It was built in 1911, so a really, really early one. We'll cross over and then we can get a better view of it. As you can see, it's now Face Dimensions Church. It was built by, wait a minute, it was one of Barber's electric picture palaces. He also had one locally in Stony Stratford, that's gone now. And his main businesses were in Tunstall in Stoke-on-Trent. Really interesting story that he was brought up in the workhouse in Tunstall from the age of 5, and he taught himself to read and write and to play the accordion to earn money in the local pubs. And from that he became a chemical and gas engineer. He worked in the mines, and then he ventured into cinemas, picture palaces. He opened his first one in Tunstall in 1909, and then Bletchley. He actually became mayor of Stoke-on-Trent, which is an incredible achievement for a boy that had no formal education and was brought up in a workhouse. The one at Stony Stratford was called La Scala, and he died in 1946. There's some of the old engine sheds. Not in a very good condition, those. I think they're probably due for demolition soon. It's a shame, but you can see the roof over there as well that's gone through. But there are still lots and lots of them left. They must have employed hundreds. Anyway, now we've got here a Lidl, which my friend Alex is the manager. Very nice shop. And over there we've got a Tesco, and we're just coming into the main centre again now. Another view of some of the engine sheds, the more derelict versions. And then round here we have the pub called the Northwestern, which was, you can see what a great position just as you get off the train. Here it is. I think that was 1861. And by the way, the Crawford Arms was quite a late one really. That was 1901. Let's look. Yeah, 1906 the Crawford Arms, and this one is indeed 1861. Across the road there we have the old bathhouse. It's nicely restored, isn't it? Nicely looked after. I'm not sure exactly what it is now. Is it a pub? Is it a restaurant? It's got the original sign over the door, Wolverton Baths, and there were 16 baths in there. They were tin baths, and they were for the railway workers, because of course nobody's houses didn't really have running water, let alone bathrooms. And that was built in 1890. Across the road there we have the London and North West Railway Fire Station, 1911. Very nicely restored. And here, this pub, well, it's called Antep Kitchen now, but it was originally a railway pub. It was the Royal Engineer, and it was built in 1840, so one of the earlier ones really. Very handy for the station, just across the road. So I think that brings us to the end of the town section of the walk. We're just driving up there now towards Stony Stratford, and we'll look at the medieval bit of Wolverton that's left. We're in Old Wolverton now, and this is the vicarage that was to this church. 1729 this was built, and it's using the de Longueville coat of arms over the door. And we're just coming up now to Holy Trinity Church, which was originally Saxon, but obviously lots of it have been rebuilt. And most of it was rebuilt in 1819. Somewhere around here there were the remains of a Norman castle, and just down there in that field we'll go and take a closer look. Got quite a good view from here actually. You can see the ridge and furrow patterns of the fields when it was enclosed in the early 17th century, the peasant clearages. So essentially all the rich landowners turfed out the peasants who prior to then had been able to work their scrap of land, and they enclosed all the fields and turned them over to sheep and other things, and the peasants had no way of earning a living, so they very soon became homeless because they couldn't pay the rent to the landlord, jobless, homeless, and the medieval villages just disappeared. So all the fields around here have got remains that you can quite easily see, ridge and furrow, and you can see raised earthworks. This was old Wolverton village down here. When we say village, there was probably only 12 or 14 little houses, but all the same, it was a community. There's lots more fields around these parts that you can see evidence of medieval life. Going down towards the wetlands, which is a nice walk where you can see lots of different bird life. And even this field here, the next field, you can see lots of bumps and ridges. So in close proximity here is Wolverton Mill and Manor Farm just over the hill, Grade 2 listed buildings which are now offices. To get here as well, I'd always found it, well, I've not been here long, couldn't find where it was, but essentially you leave Wolverton towards Stony Stratford, and at the roundabout you'll see a sign that says Old Wolverton. Just go down there till you see the brown sign for Holy Trinity Church. You can park there, walk for as far or as little as you want, and if you turned left at that roundabout you would come to the Milton Keynes Museum, which is very interesting really. There's lots of, when Milton Keynes was formed in 1967, Stacey Hill Farm is where the museum is, and locals found items in farms and factories